Hello, welcome to Parallel Lives, a podcast about maladaptive daydreaming. My name is Levi, and I am joined by Dimmer.
Hello.
Right, so this is episode 1, and the topic at hand is how does maladaptive daydreaming affect your life?
So, our guests today are Nymph, 25-year-old software engineer, Red Halo from North Carolina, and Wolfie, a criminal justice graduate. And just so we're all on the same page, we're going to quickly define maladaptive daydreaming. It's a persistent fantasy activity that is vivid and fanciful and causes distress or dysfunction. Today, we're talking about the distress and dysfunction. The proposed diagnostic criteria outlines mild, moderate, and severe. So, mild would be experiences mainly distress, but no obvious functional impairment. Moderate would be one area of functioning affected, and severe, more than one area. So, with that in mind, how would you guys describe the severity of your maladaptive daydreaming?
I think mine has changed throughout my life, kind of starting mild and then kind of ramping up into moderate. I think for a short amount of time was severe, and luckily it's been ramping back down to moderate. And I think I'm down to mild now, but I would say mild currently.
Nymph?
So I think for most of my life it has been moderate, maybe severe in really distressing situations, but mostly moderate. I think lately it has been mild as I have brought it more and more under control and have been able to limit how much I engage in that activity. Still affects me though.
I think mine is actually pretty mild. It also depends on what's happening in my life. I think as a child, it was, especially as a young child, maybe around before my preteen age, it was probably considered severe. But as an adult, especially right now, I think it's mild.
Let's say in the past, like 5 years. Let's give ourselves that window of time to work with for the moment. So, in the past, say 5 or so years, what areas was your daydreaming interfering with the most?
Probably going to in-person classes when I would have to pay attention to what the professor is saying. My attention span was really short, and the professor had to be either talking about something really interesting or addressing the class directly to get me to pay attention, because it was a hard time for me to keep focus without just going into daydreaming about something, whatever it is, something I don't like. That was a problem because I would be listening and then I would be not listening. I would be like, what did this guy or lady just say right now? I wish I didn't have to go through all that. It would have made college a lot easier.
Yeah, because you're actually a recent graduate. You just got your master's not too long ago.
Yeah.
So for the past 5 years, you've probably been deep in your education. So how do you think you stacked up to your peers? Like, did it take you longer than would probably be normal to get your master's, or were you able to stay on track?
I think I did pretty well because the only thing that really hindered my education and made me kind of graduate like a year later than most people was I took a semester off for my parents' business thing they wanted to do in another country in like 2013. So I lost a semester doing that. And also, just when I first started college, it was community college and I didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah, all of that stuff stacked together gave me an extra year college. And ironically, none of that had to do with MD. It was just that's education stuff that I had to go through.
Same to you, Nymph. Last 5 years or so.
I think the biggest areas where maladaptive daydreaming has affected me is not really my education, because I was able to finish master's a year early uh, by keeping my grades high. So that it hasn't affected my education or my job, but it has affected my functioning as a person. So a lot of times I would skip food, lose weight really badly, not sleep enough, go to sleep at like ridiculously late hours and wake up ridiculously early and have a headache constantly. So it has affected me more in my personal functioning where I feel like I'm giving up a lot of self-care and self-nutrition time to maladaptive daydreaming. To be able to do daydreaming while also be able to keep up with social and financial student responsibilities. I feel like I have been cutting off a lot of my personal health because of this. That's where it personally affects me the most. And I think it's easy for it to be brushed under the rug because it's like, oh, you're just not healthy, you. But as a young person, but in the long term, I can see a lot of side effects because of it.
Yeah, they kind of can snowball on you. So getting just
Mhm.
just a static snapshot of 5 years might not be the best approach. But
Right, but I think in last 5 years that like a lot of the times I would fall asleep in the middle of the day because my body was just that exhausted, you know? And it's things like that which like on the outside it might seem like, oh, she's just tired because she's hardworking, but it's actually this under the surface creeping up on me.
how would you say it's been in your life for the last few years, Halo?
I think that my maladaptive daydreaming has affected pretty much every facet of my life in one way or another. And as I've mentioned to you before, outside of the podcast, I kind of look at it to be certain symptoms are kind of primary symptoms and others are kind of secondary. By that I mean primary as in when you're daydreaming for several hours a day on average, you kind of lose that amount of time each day. And I would say that's like a direct result of the daydreaming. You just have less time. And you're because of the daydreaming, I'm doing it and I'm going to less social activities. I'm less productive because I'm using that time. I'm getting less sleep because I'm daydreaming instead. And it's affected through my career. I've a severe procrastination issue that I'm working on currently, and that's pretty much been throughout my entire life, not just in 5 years. As well as socially, it's caused me some issues in the past. It's I've used it mostly as a coping mechanism. So it's if ever I was in a certain amount of stress or going through a certain or dealing with something, I would daydream to kind of use it as an escape, and which wasn't a healthy way to deal with negative situations in my life because it's almost just closing your eyes and going off into an imaginary world isn't going to make your problems go away. So I would say in the last 5 years, it was kind of more moderate back then, and over time, it's gotten more and more mild. Luckily, so it's uh, it's affected my career, personal life. It's affected virtually every facet of my life. And then because it's caused issues with my career and my school life, that's kind of trickled down and hurt my, I guess, self-esteem, way I view the world. It's fractured certain relationships, be it family or romantically or friendships. I would say that it's kind of spread through everything, through one way or another.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point. I feel like I really boxed Wolfie in there by like focusing on the last couple of years. So I don't know. Do you want to go back a little bit in time, Wolfie? And like, how did it? Because you made it through okay. Like everything that held you back seemed to be not the daydreaming. What led you up to the point where it became an obvious problem?
Oh, well, then that's going back a while ago when it was a really obvious problem. My childhood. I was an only child, and only child, I had friends. They would come over and we'd play, but they weren't around all the time. So I would spend my time either watching TV or playing alone. I had to figure out a way to entertain myself. And TV, watching cartoons, that's what I guess gave me ideas. And that's how I entertained myself by making little cartoons in my head. And then I had to go to real school. I had to go to preschool, and there were problems there. And then kindergarten. And kindergarten was probably the first time daydreaming became obvious. because that was the first time someone noticed that I was doing something weird. That was my kindergarten teacher. So I was working on math problems, and I got bored, so I got up from my seat and started pacing and daydreaming. And then my teacher had to go back and tell me to go back and get to work, take a seat. I had no idea I was doing that. So it was in front of all the kids. All the kids saw me do that. It was really embarrassing.
When you think about the first time that you've daydreamed, or the first time that you realize that you're daydreaming, or you're lost in imagination, or what have you, has that impact of maladaptive daydreaming on your life become more or less with time leading up to, let's say, the present?
I think it actually did become less because, like I said before, as a kid, especially a young kid, it was really bad. And I had to learn over time to mask it and reduce it. I had to learn kind of like tricks and techniques so that I wasn't obviously daydreaming in front of people.
And then, Nymph, what about you?
So I think at first it wasn't too bad because I never had trouble masking it from people. I always was very good at doing it in private, away from people, when they weren't around. So a- as I got more time for myself, as I grew older and was able to get more privacy, it got worse because then I had more room to, do it whenever I wanted. There were no social constraints. And so it got worse before it got better. And honestly, the only reason it got better was because, as I mentioned earlier, it was severely impacting my health. I was getting headaches almost every day. I was getting sprains all the time in my leg because I used to pace around. And I one time dozed off while driving almost and had to park at the curb. And one time I almost got a concussion. So it was really, really affecting my health. And I think that was a big wake up call for me a few years ago. And once I got that wake up call, I realized that just because I can do it in private and nobody can notice it because I can keep up with my social and student responsibilities doesn't mean it isn't bad for me. And when I realized that, I was able to find techniques to curb it and bring it uh, to the point where I'm not as dependent on it to manage my emotions. So yeah, I think it got worse before it got better over my life so far. And right now I'm in that stage where I have decent control over it, and I'm hoping I'll get more control further down the road.
I think it's, it has to do a lot also with when we're kids, we're sort of allowed to have vivid imaginations and a ton of creativity, but then as we grow older and we get into school and we start jobs and we have to study and all that type of stuff, we're sort of told that okay, it's time to live in the real world now, and that sort of adds to that whole difficulty of just it makes things worse because now you're
Yeah,
sitting with this thing where you want to daydream, you want to engage with this thing, but it's like life is sort of a bit chaotic, so it's
right. And you also have all these responsibilities you now have to take care of that you don't have time for otherwise.
yeah, everything just adds together.
Yep.
And then how about you, Halo?
I've pretty much been daydreaming as long as I could remember. I guess I was the line between what's an immersive daydreamer and when it becomes maladaptive and when it becomes a problem. I guess it's kind of a more blurry line for me. I remember being as young as I could remember daydreaming constantly, and as you said earlier, it's completely normal when you're little to daydream and be in kind of in your own world. Though I guess growing up at some point in my young childhood, it's because of different money issues, because of issues of I moved from the north into a more rural area, kind of in the south, and there were certain openly racist uh, issues that I had to kind of deal with growing up, social issues and other kind of things. And at some point, it became more. I started daydreaming more and more, and it became kind of a severe issue. And at some point in my teen years, I guess this is the power of being anonymous on the internet. It just is this red halo name. I guess I'll admit, for a while, my dad went to jail, and I was a young teen, and then my mother had a severe medical condition. So there was a period of time when I was a young teen, and I had my part-time job. I technically was the only person with an income in my family for a couple months, for a few months. And that kind of stress really got to me, and also the social pressures, because I was terrified. I didn't want anybody in my school or anybody that I knew to know what was going on, because I guess it's a mixture of shame and other issues. And I would kind of daydream these worlds, and I would always just think of them as stories. I always wanted to write a novel or a comic or a movie one day or something. So I would just have these plots in my head that would just go on and on and on, dozens, hundreds of them now. I can't even remember, of these overarching plots and characters and subplots. And I would always, whenever I was doing work, whenever I was doing pretty much anything, I was always in this world. And then the problems from leaving into another kind of imaginary world while I'm doing things, they just kind of compounded over time. And my procrastination issue got worse, and then focus issues started appearing as well. And this was also before I realized what maladaptive daydreaming was. So I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then that fear, I was daydreaming all the time and all these other things. I was thinking, maybe could I have another disorder? Could it be more severe? Could it be some kind of bad mental disorder where this could be terrifying in my mind? The unknown and what it could be always kind of shook me a little bit at the time. So I started also trying random treatments, and some almost dangerous ones, to try to fix my issues. And over time, luckily, it's gotten from that severe and more moderate. And now I think it's much more mild now that I kind of have it much more under control.
Mm. I think you mentioned a really important aspect of maladaptive daydreaming as well, where you said that you use this as a coping mechanism to sort of escape from social pressures and general life issues and things like that. But over time, that didn't fix any problems. In fact, it added more stress to things as well, which is something that a lot of people also need to understand about maladaptive daydreaming. It feels like it's helping, but at the end of the day, it's just adding, it's not fixing the problem at all. It's sort of just masking the problem.
I like what Halo said there too about the fear from before you knew what it was, and that was a source of a lot of distress. What part of what's happening, what part of what it's affecting is like, especially with you, Nymph, a lot of you know uh, physical descriptions. I guess I'm asking more about the emotional descriptions. What's it? This is what it does, but what does it feel like?
So, I mean, again, I don't want to say that it doesn't have an emotional effect. I think it has a bit of a numbing effect for me personally. And I think that's why I do it, because it's a coping mechanism. I think the way it is definitely a coping mechanism for me. Um, the way Red Halo pointed out, in that it numbs a lot of my more extreme emotions. Anger is a big one for me. Um, and in a way, it helps me in that I don't express my anger as often in my personal life, and don't lash out at people when they shouldn't be lashed out at. But at the same time, it kind of numbs me to a lot of other positive emotions, and that I think causes me a lot of distress personally, because personally I feel like in my everyday friends and family interactions, I'm rather passive when it comes to emotional investment. Um, and I guess maladaptive daydreaming is really fun because you can pour all of your messy emotions in a very safe space you've created in your head, but at the same time you're also not really dealing with them. And personally, I feel like whenever I stop maladaptive daydreaming, I find myself a lot more irritated with people, a lot more angry, And because I never learned how to actually process those emotions properly, I, deal with it poorly in my personal life. So, in an emotional sense, I think it has a numbing factor for me.
What about you, Wolfie?
I guess sometimes I will daydream about bad things, and my brain will just not stop with these intrusive thoughts, and sometimes the intrusive thoughts will become a daydream. I will think about them so long that it feels like I'm daydreaming about them. I really hate that. Just like I will remember things that I did as a child and daydream scenarios about that bad memory. And it's like, why? I don't need to do this. It's already happened. It makes me feel really bad. They keep coming back, and I don't know how to make them stop. Most of the times, I think my daydreams are pretty harmless, like, and they're funny and entertaining, but sometimes I'll just be thinking about something that I shouldn't be thinking about, and it doesn't stop.
A lot of the problems of maladaptive daydreaming, at least for me, it's kind of sometimes like a domino effect, like the procrastination issue or the issues of it's where it's harder to focus, or it kind of impairs other things in life almost in a secondary factor. In that, in my social life, I would rather daydream a lot of the time and just pace around in a room, kind of over and over and over, instead of doing certain things socially, which kind of impaired my social life and sometimes kind of also gives you a little bit of social atrophy, if that makes sense. If the less you talk to people, the more your relationship suffers. And then the more that happens, the less you connect with other people. So then that gives you a more of a reason to daydream in the future. And those kind of negative spirals kept happening various ways. And being addicted to the daydreams, there's a lot of issues that I'm not sure would be directly from maladaptive daydreaming. For instance, there are a lot of secondary side effects. For instance, with other addictions, be it because people can become addicted to anything, we're just addicted to these immersive daydreams. So, and then there's secondary side effects like we're addicted to the daydreams, a lot of us have energy issues. I know Nymph just said that they were constantly exhausted, and it seems to be very common depending on voice chat and other issues with other people here, and it's very common in my life. I'd also have energy issues. I don't know if it's directly from the maladaptive daydreaming, or I think it. This is my personal my personal hypothesis, but I think it's tiring to be in these really vivid and imaginative daydream worlds constantly for hours a day, and sometimes it's almost as if my brain would just get tired. And for instance, chess players are sitting there for hours a day calculating, doing all of these chess moves. And many of them are completely exhausted, even though that they're young, just by imagining all these calculations. And I don't think maladaptive daydreaming is any less intense than some of these intellectual kind of games, because we're daydreaming characters, we're daydreaming ourselves in different social situations, experiencing their emotions. And that kind of fatigue and mental fatigue kind of created a brain fog, I guess. Or I'm not sure if that's secondary because of the addictive side to it, where we're addicted to the hormones and we get the serotonin and dopamine rushes constantly, which kind of create a negative effect, which is common in various other addictions as well. So I'm not sure when what part of it is the maladaptive daydreaming and which parts are kind of go along with the addiction side, or just from doing it for so many hours a day. But it's just there's so many negatives, and I'm not sure where maladaptive daydreaming begins and where other comorbid disorders kind of start.
I do want to get back to what Wolfie said earlier, though, about the intrusive thoughts. I know that the problem with maladaptive daydreaming as well is that it's like you're obsessing over certain thoughts, right? Like certain thoughts replay over and over in your mind, and when those thoughts are negative or when they're intrusive, it really has a very tiring effect on you as well. because a lot of times, people are thinking, well, maladaptive daydreaming, it has to do just with daydreaming or just with, characters and worlds, but a lot of people don't take into account the intrusiveness of it as well, especially if it's thoughts that you don't want to remember. So yeah, that was also an interesting point to make.
Yeah, what did you say there? People think that it's just daydreaming or, it's just this or that. So I'm kind of wondering if we can get some anecdotes here. So I'm going to set up a situation. You go to your doctor or your therapist and they ask you to tell them a story, which will showcase what you're talking about, why this is a problem. Can you recall a time for us maybe that would really illustrate to somebody how this is intrusive in your life? And it doesn't have to be, I don't mean like your most severe episode or anything like that. It doesn't need to be particularly severe or anything, just something that showcases why this is a problem for you.
I've got one. I guess I could start off while the other two think if they want. Um, I'm normally a pacer, and I generally don't listen to music while I was daydreaming though. So I remember walking and pacing in my room kind of in a circle-ish kind of shape, and just while mumbling a little bit to myself, maybe twitching just slightly, just in a circle, just over and over and over. And at some point, I realized that the door was open and that my sister was standing there and just watching me. And I could tell on her expression, she was kind of looking at me just what in the fresh hell are you doing? What are you doing? This is strange. I remember, because it's hard to explain to people that aren't immersive daydreamers or aren't maladaptive. When you kind of come out of a long daydream, sometimes you get it's fuzzy sometimes, or sometimes it's like you have to reload like reality.exe in your brain. And I kind of was looking at her, and I didn't have any excuse. I was just walking in a room in a circle and I didn't really have any reason for it that I could give her. So I remember just looking back at her for a moment, I didn't say anything. And she stood there for a moment expecting some kind of an explanation. And then when it didn't happen, she just slowly closed the door and I heard her walk away. And it was so embarrassing, and to this day it makes me cringe a little bit.
One time I think it had just rained in our this is my childhood home, and I was around like 16, and it had rained really badly, and some of the floor was really wet because we had like these huge window panes, and the water came in quite often. So my mom, she very clearly warned us that, hey, I'm not going to get to clean this until evening, nobody touch it. And I, having the compulsive need to pace, I told myself multiple times, don't do that, it's dangerous. And then I started pacing anyway. And then I slipped and I hit myself in the head. And my immediate impulse was to try to get up and continue. And that's obviously dangerous. Luckily, my mom was able to found out I was bleeding, and then she was able to get me stitched up. But it's just one of those moments when I realize like how strong my need is to go back to this. Like I'm on the floor, I just hit my head, I'm bleeding, and I still want to continue. And I think that's the example I gave my therapist when I was explaining this to her, and she was like, "Wow, like okay, that seems serious."
Wolfie?
Yeah, I've been caught daydreaming before many times by my parents or even kids at school. I guess one time that I vividly remember was that as a kid, not really understand that what I did was weird. So like I've been caught many times for doing that. And I don't know if that has to do more with autism or what, but just not understanding that what I was doing was not socially acceptable. But one time I was watching my VHS tapes, and this was back before YouTube and music on a CD and stuff like that. At least I didn't even have any of those like CD players and things as a kid. So I had to use the actual TV and the VCR to help me daydream some things for fun. And the VCR for a long time was in the game room, and that room was, it had no door. It was just an open room. So one time I was daydreaming and I was pacing and making sounds. My dad was watching me, and he was clearly trying to like hide so I wouldn't see him. And I caught him watching me, and he was laughing, like he was like, "What is going on here?" It's like, this kid plays so weird. And I went over to him and I kind of just like tackled him and like, and I don't think I even said anything. I was just like, stop. This must have been like really embarrassing. Just like get him to like leave, like stop watching me. This is like my personal fun time here. Like, why are you looking?
I'm listening to these and I'm like, oh my God, I got stories that are weirdly similar. I think a lot of us do.
Yeah.
Like those moments where we realized this is a problem, like a real problem.
Right.
The one that got me was it was after my son was born, and I took him to an indoor play place. And I'm a responsible parent. You know, I put my phone away. I was paying attention to him. He was in this little ball pit thing, and he couldn't find a ball. I was looking right at him, and this stranger came over and just took him by the hand and walked off with him. And I didn't see it happen. I was staring right at him.
Oh, wow.
Oh no.
I'd slipped into a daydream and I didn't see a complete stranger walk away with my toddler. So when I eventually snapped out of it, like my whatever part of me was still conscious must have realized something was wrong. I don't know how long he was gone for. He was okay. It was just another parent like helping him find a ball. But that was a big wake up like moment.
Right. Oh my God. That's a good story.
Yeah. If I had to tell somebody like what's so awful about it? Why is it a problem? Yeah, because my child can be kidnapped right in front of my face and I wouldn't know.
Right. Oh my God. It's terrifying.
I think it is worth mentioning to kind of add on to that how sometimes when we get into really deep immersive daydreams, sometimes it feels like the world around us kind of blacks out, and we're almost entranced in the daydream sometimes. I don't know how common it is with the rest of you, but sometimes you can miss entire conversations or people that are trying to get your attention sometimes, and you're just so zoned out, kind of in your own world, that it can become that does become an issue, and it's especially if you're driving and you start to drift off into a daydream. I've done that a few times before, and I've legitimately I turn off all my music and I completely make myself completely in the moment because I'm afraid I might run into something or not see something because I would drift off into daydreams.
One benefit of only doing it in private is that I don't really know how I would react if other people tried to talk to me. But I definitely know what you mean by that hazy feeling you get when you get out of it. It's like you almost had to reload your entire life all over again. And I think that can really, leave you disoriented.
Someone explained it really well to me from the comment section. They said that it's sort of like they're logging off from the real world for a bit, which is such a good way to put it because it's almost like you're on autopilot, right? And to get back to what Halo said, especially when you're driving, I'm a motorcycle rider and I do that a lot. And when I told people that I do that, they don't understand. They're just like, "Oh, you really shouldn't do that." And I'm like, "Thanks, man. It's not like I
I
can
had no
control it, you
idea
know?"
I'm not supposed to do that. Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry. What a great advice.
Yeah, it's not like, that's the thing about MD is that it's not like sometimes we do control it, but when we hit that autopilot part of it, especially in conversations and things like that, it's just like we don't realize until we realize. And then it's like, oh damn, I kind of zoned out there.
think the compulsive part of it too, right? Like your need to go back to it is so strong that even when you know you shouldn't even, go there, it's really hard not to. Like it's like a weird pull.
It has created many awkward situations throughout my life. I'm just trying to think of some of them, like just trying to once you come out of the daydream. Like I remember there isn't really a term for it, I guess, but I've just been calling it like the immersive daydreams, like the really deep ones. I was kind of just calling the immersive daydreams, but then there's also you just kind of also go into daydreams while you're talking or doing other tasks or chores, and I just started calling them passive daydreams because I didn't know if there was another word for it yet. So I would constantly passive daydream into like these paracosms and whatnot, into these imaginary worlds. And I remember being in conversations with people. All of a sudden, uh, like back in the day, I was helping in local politics, and then people were talking to me, and I was having in a conversation with them, but I was mostly in my daydream. And all of a sudden, everybody bursts out laughing and says, "Oh, that's a great point." And then all of a sudden, I have to log back into the real world, and I'm thinking, I don't know what the hell I just said. What are we talking about? What's going on? And I'm just trying to just trying to jump back into reality, and sometimes it's shocking, and I'm not sure what I said or what's going on, and that kind of going back and forth, it is kind of terrifying sometimes.
That happens to me as well. My husband came in one time. He's like, I'm going to make some pizza, but I'm going to put it in the microwave instead of on the pizza stone. And I'm like, all right, sounds great. Give me a kiss. Mm. And he comes back 3 minutes later with a slice of pizza for me. And I go, why didn't you use the pizza stone? Because I was daydreaming the entire time he was talking to me. I talked to him. I said it was fine. I kissed him. I had no idea. But he got mad. He got so mad because it's not just that one time. It's all the time. And this was before I had
Mhm.
told him about the maladaptive daydreaming, which just leaves your partner so upset because they think you don't listen to them ever. You don't ever listen to me. You don't care about what I say.
Right.
So yeah, and so that was like just another straw on the pile. I had missed like 3 of my son's dentist appointments that week because I was just on autopilot when I picked him up. I went home instead of to the appointment. And when you miss an appointment,
It costs you.
it costs you. There's a fee. Like I have paid a small fortune in like no-show fees. And my dentist finally got to the point where he was like, "We're gonna drop you as a patient. Like, show up."
Wow. Yeah. They don't do that.
Yeah, all these little things that build up. So I mean, there's a lot of the obvious things. But so yeah, I don't what are those little things for you? For me, it was the little tiny incident after tiny incident that made my husband feel like I didn't care or listen to him. But do you guys have like examples of the little things?
I mean, I mostly gave examples of the big things in my physical health, but a lot of the little things that I give up that really add up. Like even appointments, right? I have a really hard time being on time sometimes. Or like I'm always like precisely on time and really rushed because I'm spending all of the extra time I have, the buffer times, daydreaming. And it adds up, I miss appointments because I would rather be daydreaming than go to the thing that I should be doing. Or sometimes I will, not do health checkups on time. I will, drive really fast on the road because I was busy daydreaming and I left too late for an important test, for example. I think one example is this year I was going to give a very important proficiency test for something, and it's a it's a type of appointment that is really hard to get in general, and because of the pandemic, even more hard because the test centers are mostly closed. And I was able to get an appointment finally, and I was ready for it. I had studied for it and everything, and on the day of, it was around noon. So I had to leave by 10 because it was 2 hours away. That's the only test center I could find. And I was running late because of the maladaptive daydreaming thing. And I got to the test center 5 minutes late. And they're really strict about that kind of stuff. They were able to squeeze me in, but I lost 10, 15 minutes of actual test time. And maybe my score would have been better if I had shown up on time. I was fully prepared for it too. Luckily, I got a good score, but again, so many ifs. And it's just the little things that add up and cost you big time.
When we're in our different daydream worlds, and everybody daydreams about different things and different feelings, but it's common to have a more idealized version of yourself, and you start seeing of yourself as those characters, and you live out either these fantasies, though many of them are also dark, or you're experiencing these different lives. Then it also gives unrealistic expectations in life, and it oftentimes life can feel empty because oftentimes when you don't have those same things, it kind of sometimes it's almost unfair to people around you that you're almost judging your life and your relationships with them compared to sometimes what's perfection or what can't be obtained in real life sometimes. And it's those kind of unrealistic expectations often would affect my self-esteem, which seems to be common around here as well, and different views on life in general. And you're always comparing your world to reality, and it's not really a fair comparison.
I don't know. I was having a really hard time thinking of this one. I guess one little thing that adds up literally is like loss of sleep, because I know that when I was in school, I would daydream when I had time, which was usually when I was home and after I had done all my homework. I was like, okay, it's time to daydream, and it's way past my bedtime, but I don't care, and I keep doing it. And then the next day, I am extremely tired. I feel really terrible. I kept doing it. If I was really obsessed with something at some time, that's when it gets really bad. If I have a new story that I wanted to tell, a new scene in one of my stories, even. I think when I was at my job as a graduate assistant for my master's degree, it got so bad that I had to quit my job because there were problems in the actual job itself, which didn't need to exist but combined that with my actual problem with not sleeping well because I had to daydream so much. It was just I couldn't do that job anymore because I was starting to actually get lower grades and I needed to graduate that semester. So I had to quit the job. I couldn't do it like normal people because I had to do my daydreaming or else.
It's one thing that I used to do was with music, right? Oh God, this is gonna make me sound so old, but I had a Walkman. Yeah, with like a headphones from like the 80s. And I would put them on and sleep like that. And I'm a side sleeper too. So
Ooh.
I would press into my ear, but it didn't matter. Just like you fell down, you smashed your head open, you wanted to get right back up and daydream. Like my ears hurt so bad, but it didn't matter. I just kept going. And I gave up music a while ago, so I hadn't worn headphones in a while, but then to do the podcast or to voice chat with people on the Discord, I started wearing headphones again, and they hurt my ears so bad. And I don't know if it's connected. I really feel like it's because I damaged them like that and was always in constant pain in my
Ugh.
younger years.
I mean, it's related to that. I'm pretty sure I have runner's knee from all the pacing, mostly running really, that I do because of daydreaming. Like I get knee pain a lot for someone my age. I don't know if it's related, but I'm gonna guess so.
Has the physical stuff like really added up on you, Halo?
So I'm in a weird position right now. I've been daydreaming about all my life, but about, I would say, the last 2.5 months, I've pretty much stopped. I've pretty much gone cold turkey. I've stopped the immersive daydreamings pretty much completely, and the passive ones, for the most part, I've cut back tremendously on them. And I'm only bringing that up because some of the side effects I've been having kind of, I guess, have been reversing themselves, and it's just interesting to kind of I'm noticing that I'm improving. I didn't realize how bad I was in several ways. For instance, like you said, sleep. In the past, throughout all my life, even like certain teen years and like like childhood, when I should be like the most energetic of my life, I was always tired. Like the fatigue was very severe. And sometimes I would sleep 8, 9, 10, even more hours when it got really bad, and I would still, when I woke up, I would still feel even more tired. Now that I'm not daydreaming anymore, and I went through that kind of withdrawal symptoms for 3 weeks or 3, 4 weeks, and I've gotten kind of past it, I'm able to kind of survive on way less sleep all of a sudden. And it's kind of like, I'm gaining so much time every day, and I'm way more energetic, and I don't get the fatigue, and I don't get the tiredness that I would get, and I didn't realize just how tired I was now that I have more energy and I can do more things. And there are other things other than just the energy issues. Well, overall, way more energy now too. And I have less brain fog now. I have less. I'm able to focus more. It's almost like my brain had to relearn to kind of live in the moment, and not daydream off to the side. And I would say that those kind of living with those issues, it was definitely pretty debilitating, almost sometimes. And now being kind of without them, or my issues are becoming more and more mild and starting to go away, it's definitely kind of like a new lease on life.
Wolfie, did you want to add anything to like maybe how your repetitive movement or anything impacts like your actual body?
Yeah, sometimes I'll get foot pain if I pace for hours. Sometimes I will stub my toe, or a sharp point of a furniture will scratch me or hit me in my hip or something. I'll hit my hand on something. Things are always in my way. I don't think I've ever had a room where nothing hits me.
So a lot of maladaptive daydreamers talk about feeling extremely frustrated or maybe even angry at times when they're barred from daydreaming or when their daydreams are interrupted. To everyone here, how do you feel when you are unable to daydream? Do you experience any withdrawal symptoms, or does it impact you emotionally, or how can you explain that?
So normally, when I was daydreaming more, it would if I was daydreaming and somebody would bother me, or I would have to be pulled out of it all of a sudden, it would be very irritating. And especially if I was able to have a time where I could pace alone in a room, this or that. Like if I had to knock on the door, or I had to do something else, even if it's something I enjoyed doing, oftentimes I was just so addicted to the daydreaming, I didn't want to come out of it. And and if I tried to curb the daydreaming and tried to do it less, I would get certain negative issues, the anger, the just the feeling of just feeling terrible in general, this and that. And I would say it got the worst part was when I quit cold turkey a couple 2.5 months ago or so. And I went through about 3 weeks of severe symptoms, anger issues, irritation. The brain fog for a while got worse. Certain things weren't enjoyable anymore. I went through pretty much all the major symptoms of like breaking an addiction. I generally tried to just curb my daydreaming by doing it less and less each day, but I didn't have any success with that, and I kept falling back into bad habits. Out of almost desperation and trying to fix my problems, I began trying to go cold turkey, and it's worked really well for me. Though I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, because it really is incredibly stressful. And to learn to kind of live without an important coping mechanism isn't something that I think everybody should go through if they don't have to. And it's definitely a sudden shift in life, and it does create a lot of problems on its own.
I have some experience going cold turkey myself. I think I went almost a month once, and it was awful. And when I slipped back and when I relapsed, I was actually worse. Like my brain was catching up. And I definitely agree. Like I definitely felt a lot of irritation and anger towards everybody in my life. Felt like I wanted to, scream at everybody. And overall, I just felt like I was kind of like my personal life was just very dull in comparison. Is what I found, and I found that to be, very distressful. Like it made me more depressed. And lately, I've had the opposite experience because I've tried to go cold turkey multiple times, and it has never worked for me. And lately, what's been working for me, and it might not work in like 5 months, so ask me then. But what has been working for me is to curb it down slowly, and also replace the habit with something that's enjoyable but less addictive. So, video games I need to catch up on, or even sleep. Previously, I would always try to replace my daydreams with productive grunge work, and then I didn't want to do it. And lately, I've been replacing it with enjoyable but not super addictive activities, and that has been helping me curb it down slowly. But I definitely feel like the days I don't daydream as much, I definitely am more irritable than usual.
Okay. And then how about you, Wolfie? How do you experience any withdrawal symptoms or being unable to daydream?
I think I do also get kind of mad because daydreaming's like, unless something really good happened that day and it sticks with me for the rest of the day, daydreaming is the most fun part. It is the most fun that I have all day. So if I don't have a way to like have fun, to like the saying, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Like you don't have a time for just something that's not just not work related or not stress related, like then yeah, you're gonna start to get really overwhelmed and start to feel some negative emotions. So I think I do get kind of depressed and also angry.
I think it brings up a good point about maladaptive daydreaming is fun. It does feel good. I'm sure once in a while we have the intrusive, like freaky ones, but overall you get addicted to it because it's awesome. Like it feels good. And I think for a lot of people that can hide the effect that it's actually having on your life or cause them to minimize the effect. Like, I can't pay attention at school, but that's not a big deal. Like, I'm happy, so who cares? I'm not hurting anyone else. And I thought like that too. But it really did take years of these things building up for me to notice just how bad it had gotten.
That's also the addictive part of it, right? Is because real life is just, it has its really bad areas and it has its stressful areas, and it's kind of boring compared to our daydreams. Like, who wouldn't want to be, in a world where things are just better for us and things like that? And that's where, like I said, the addictive part comes in, and we don't really notice it unless it's really bad. But then also, a lot of people feel that they don't really want to get rid of it because, well, what do they have then? It's sort of like, well, this might be a very extreme comparison, but it's very similar to drug use in a way. You get so addicted to the nice feeling of it until it becomes such a big problem that's so difficult to walk away from.
I was in a awkward situation once with kind of my family watching a movie, and it was one about a prison, and I remember they were showing him as a punishment. They gave him isolated confinement, and he was in his empty room by himself, and he was just pacing around, and he was just going crazy because he couldn't stand, and it was torture. I remember saying out loud, it's not that bad being in that situation. I don't think it's really that bad. And
Oh my
everybody else kind
God.
of looked at me like, what are you talking about? And I just kind of spoke out loud without thinking.
There's an episode of The Twilight Zone. I can't remember what it's called, where it goes through the episode, and the twist at the end is that he was an astronaut in training, and he had been in a isolation chamber for like a month. And I remember watching that, going like, "Oh my God, I wish I could be in an isolation chamber for like a month. That'd be so easy."
Mm-hmm.
After a month, they'll open the door, and then you'll say, no, 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 I'm not done yet. And just ask them to close the door back. Give you a little longer.
Exactly. And it is like that too. Like you go on a 16-hour daydream binge, and then somebody walks in like, "Hey, we gotta go do this." And invariably, what's a maladaptive daydreamer gonna say? Like, "Give me 5 more minutes."
Just learning about maladaptive daydreaming, I think, has been a big help to me. realizing that other people are doing it as well, and we share so many different symptoms and certain other issues, this and that. I remember just finding about it. I kind of ignored it at first. Some other people daydream, kind of, and I kind of until I saw a meme. I think it was a SpongeBob meme on on the subreddit about that other people paced. I didn't really realize that other people also paced, and I was like, wait, I have to look into this more. And just knowing that the daydreaming causes certain issues, and that I have to try to limit it more, and that it's all connected, and that's been a huge help, as well as knowing other people are kind of dealing with it. Just talking to other people here on voice chat and their experiences, or filling other things with hobbies, filling time with other kind of hobbies and stuff like sarcasm mentioned. It's been really useful for curbing my maladaptive daydreaming, along with all the other pinned resources here, like going to different things on the subreddit or different YouTube channels or different studies. It's been really, really useful for me and keeping my maladaptive daydreaming in check.
I mean, I think Halo kind of touched on this, but even just connecting your distress in your personal life to the maladaptive daydreaming can be a huge process. Like, I think it took me a very long time to be like, oh, I have these health issues and these procrastination issues, and that's connected to my maladaptive daydreaming habit. I think that connection, once I made that, I think I made a lot of progress, but that took a very long time.
Yeah, there are just strange things that you wouldn't think are connected to it. One day the dominoes just fall into place and you're like, oh.
My whole life makes sense now.
Yeah, it's really surreal. And we will do an episode on finding out about maladaptive daydreaming, because that is a big experience for a lot of people. It affects people very deeply. But I think that's it for today. Next time on the podcast, we'll be talking about telling people about maladaptive daydreaming and how that all panned out for our guests.
Yeah, so that is it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, for listening. Be sure to either subscribe, follow, like, all that type of stuff.
We'll put a bunch of links down in the description for you to the ICMDR, where you can find links to research papers. We'll put a link to the Discord if you want to be a guest on the podcast or sit in as part of the audience. You can join the subreddit, Our Maladaptive Dreaming. Wild Minds is back up and running. There's active communities on every social media platform, on Instagram, on Tumblr, Twitter, Amino, Facebook.
The Maladaptive Daydreaming OnlyFans.
Oh my god. I'm sure it exists.
I'm leaving that in. But yeah, thanks for listening. Bye.